Marcelo, the consent decree that has been entered into by T-Mobile and along, obviously, with Sprint, of which you're still executive chairman, do you believe it will create a fourth competitor in the wireless market in the form of Dish?
Absolutely. That was the condition set by the DOJ in order for them to approve this transaction. And you can see by the level of concessions that we have made in terms of giving Dish access to the new network, giving them access to, or basically disposing our 800 megahertz spectrum, giving them access to some of our stores, to some of our towers, buying our two incredible brands, right, Boost and Virgin. So I think Dish will be set up to be a viable competitor. You know, he gets to start from a privileged position with a lot of great spectrum. He doesn't need to build legacy networks. He can go straight to 5G. So I think Dish will be a viable competitor. But I think the most important part is definitely the race that we're going to put to AT&T and to Verizon in terms for 5G, forcing them to invest. And we could not be more ready in order for us to start building this incredible 5G network that we plan to build.
Yeah, well, as obviously the executive vice president of SoftBank, which will own roughly 27% of this combined company, and I believe you'll also be on its board. You know, I wonder, there were some investors I've spoken to, Marcelo, who were worried about T-Mobile's competitiveness, given what you just described as a really empowered potential competitor in Dish. Do you still think the company's going to be able to be a strong competitor and profitable and a growth company in the environment you just described?
Absolutely. I mean, if you see what T-Mobile has been able to do and what Sprint has been able to do, how competitive both of us have been now, combine the two of us, and now you're going to have a turbocharged competitor who is absolutely going to take it to AT&T and to Verizon by offering a better product, nationwide coverage. And not only that, you know, we plan to go after Charter, we plan to go after your owner, Comcast, to go pretty hard at it, because now we're going to provide choices in-home broadband. So, you know, I think the market is going to be much bigger. I think we are going to have a much better product. And we've made it very clear, you know, the world's best 5G network and much better prices. So I think the big winner, once this transaction gets approved, is going to be the American consumer. And it's going to be the country as a whole to be able to have to get us back in the race to 5G, in this global race that is so important for U.S. innovation.
You and John Ledger, of course, and others have talked about being able to compete with cable in terms of bringing a 5G product into the home that will replace the broadband product currently provided by the likes of our parent company Comcast or Charter. How long is it going to be until you really can do that?
I mean, not only have we said about it, we've actually filed in the FCC a very clear plan that basically outlines how we plan to compete against cable. We're going to have a lot of capacity. When you're able to build this network, in many cases, we're going to have 8 times the current capacity. And this is going to give us the capacity to compete in many places where there's very little competition and offer a better in-home broadband solution to compete against cable. As you know, cable is pretty much a monopoly in much of the country. So bringing a new choice is going to be great for the American consumer. And we expect this to happen. In many cases, it's going to happen right away. In some cases, as we build the network, it's going to happen in the next few months and years. But we feel very confident that the American consumer is going to welcome a new type of competitor. As you see, there's a new trend of a lot of people who actually never subscribed to in-home broadband, and they have been cord cutters since day one. So those are the millennials. Those are the people that are going to be ready to subscribe to our in-home broadband solution.
All right. So, I mean, conceivably, in as soon as a year, I'm going to be on TV talking about potentially cable having lost broadband subs, or keeping focus on what T-Mobile's additions are of 5G so-called broadband subs. Fair to say?
Absolutely, no doubt.
The synergy numbers for the deal, which of course were enormous, $43 billion net present value, I think $6 billion annual run rate, are unchanged. Why is that, given all that you seemingly have given up in terms of getting the consent decree?
I mean, they're unchanged because the basics have not changed as it relates to most of this network. Most of the synergies come from building this 5G network, from having one network instead of two, from having one IT system instead of two. So the basics have not changed. So therefore, we're able to maintain the same level of synergies.
Marcelo, I know you were part of these negotiations with the Department of Justice, obviously, along with Deutsche Telekom and T-Mobile management. It got, my understanding is, pretty tough in there. What if the deal had not actually been approved and a consent decree not reached with the DOJ and you'd not been able to get there? What would have happened to Sprint?
I mean, I would like to say that we acted very responsible from day one when we decided to enter into this transaction. We have studied what does it take in order to create a successful merger. And before we would embark and risk Sprint, we were very certain that this deal has all the merits to get approved. I mean, when have you heard of a deal in which we're making firm commitments in Congress, Senate, FCC, DOJ, in which we're going to have a much better product, 8 times the capacity, guaranteed lower prices, finally rural coverage all over America, and so on. So when you put so many commitments and when you're so certain that this is exactly what the country needs, right? This deal is good for the American consumer. This deal is going to take competition to a whole different level. So there's no reason why a deal like this one didn't have to get approved. You know, I got to be fair and I got to commend Chairman Pai. I got to commend Assistant Attorney General Macon Del Rain, because they're bold. I mean, they're bold leaders who decided to not get in the middle of this merger, actually endorse this merger, because they understand how important this is for the future of our country. The level of innovation that was brought in 4G is tiny compared to the level of innovation that's coming in 5G with those gig speeds, with those with no latency networks. So the U.S. cannot afford to get to be second or to be third. And this is the only chance that the U.S. has to basically build the world's most advanced 5G network. It's simple. We have the spectrum needed to build it. We have the money, and money has been secured in order for us to build this network. So it takes leaders like the FCC, DOJ, CFIUS to understand that this is good for America and this is good for the American consumer.
Well, you know, there are still 13 states and the District of Columbia that don't necessarily agree. What is your sense of the state cases in which they're trying to obviously stop the deal, given the consent decree that's been reached with the DOJ? Will those states stand down, in your opinion?
Well, you know, I'll tell you something. As an immigrant, I have a tremendous faith in our country, in the justice system of our country. And after the consent decree, after the states have a chance to study the consent decree, to me, this makes all the sense in the world. We're not eliminating 4 competitors. You're going to have 4 competitors. You're going to have a very viable competitor in terms of Dish. We're going to bring more competition to AT&T, Verizon, Comcast, Charter, and others. So therefore, if I'm a state attorney, I'm going to look, how is this good for my state? Are we going to create more jobs in our state? Absolutely. Are we going to have an amazing network that's going to foster innovation in my state? Absolutely. So I find it hard, and I'm really hoping that this doesn't turn into a political fight, that the state attorney generals are able to evaluate this deal on how good this is going to be for their state, how good it's going to be for their constituents, for their consumers, and have a lot of faith on the state attorney generals that once they understand the consent decree and the level of competition that's going to exist in their market, that hopefully they will sit down and be able to reach an agreement with us.
And when would you hope to actually close the transaction? Sometime in the 4th quarter of this year?
Well, obviously, we hope to close it as soon as possible. We understand that there will be a trial date sometime around October. We hopefully, like we said since day one, we're open to speaking to the attorney generals. We're able to show them why this is good for their states. And then hopefully that could happen as soon as the consent decree is entered. If not, we're fully prepared to go to trial and then be able to defend the merits of this merger. And, you know, these are basically pretty odd times, right? I think in the history of the U.S., in terms of U.S. history, there has only been one case, if I'm not mistaken, back in the 1940s where something like this happened. Traditionally, when CFIUS, the FCC, and the Department of Justice have approved a transaction, normally the transaction would go through, and that has been the greatness of our country. Now let's hope that this case is not different, and we're looking forward to engaging in constructive discussion with the different attorney generals.
Marcelo, the management of T-Mobile, a number of people during the course of this process have pointed out to me that current CEO Michael Sievert is going to actually take over as CEO at some point in the not-too-distant future. Do you have a date as to when that is expected to happen?
I think you can ask that question to John. The CEO that will be appointed after the merger will be John Legere, and then it'll be up to John and the team. What I can tell you is there will be a lot of Sprint employees within the management team of the new company. And like we made the commitment that pretty much every single sales force of Sprint is going to be offered a job, and most of Sprint employees are going to be offered jobs, and that's what I care about. That was probably the most important part before entering this merger, was to guarantee employment to most of the Sprint workforce, especially the front line that's out there fighting every single day. As it relates to Mike and John, I'm sure that's going to be a board decision. I'm sure John is going to be heavily involved. And, I don't have more information to give you. I'm sure John is going to be on CNBC later on talking to you, and you can ask him that question, David.
I certainly hope to hear from him at some point soon. And obviously, to your point, there will be a secondary headquarters in Overland Park, Kansas. You have, in a sense, moved on. Obviously, you've still been very involved as executive chairman of Sprint, but you are also executive vice president at SoftBank, Marcelo. Does getting Sprint done, so to speak, help you guys as you seem to be marketing a new vision fund? And can you give us any idea as to how far along you are, given the reports that we've had recently about Microsoft potentially or Goldman Sachs becoming investors in the next vision fund?
I mean, this transaction marks a very specific milestone in our transformation that we have at SoftBank, from transforming from an operating or a telco into a strategic holding or an investment company. This is part of a long-term plan. The first one was taking our Japanese telco public. That has been quite a successful IPO. Secondly was trying to execute this merger. As you know, still not done, but I think today reached a significant milestone. As it relates to SoftBank Vision Fund 2, Masa was pretty explicit that that's part of the plan. And all I can tell is stay tuned, because there's some stuff that I think is going to be very positive.
Yeah, well, you're already focused on Latin America. Of course, that's the last time you and I spoke. But I would assume that you guys are going to be fairly successful amassing a new set of assets. Do you agree?
And I would say that we're in the midst of the artificial intelligence revolution. And as I'm sure you follow, we have done extensive set of investments all over the world for companies that utilize artificial intelligence to disrupt the traditional business models. The Vision Fund 1 has invested at an accelerated pace. Last time you and I spoke, we spoke about $1 billion a week. And obviously, Vision Fund 1 is coming to an end. And in the last earnings call, Masa was very clear that Vision Fund 2 is part of the equation. So, soon you'll be able to hear news about it.
All right. Well, we look forward to that as well. And I assume this may be the last time we see you wearing a Sprint T-shirt. Is that correct?
Well, this merger is not done. And, David, you and I have been part of this journey since August 2014. And I'll proudly be wearing my Sprint shirt for hopefully on TV with you, hopefully one more time when we announce the final merger. But I'll be wearing this shirt for many years to come, as this has been an incredible journey of transforming Sprint and hopefully be able to do one of telco's most important mergers, once we're able to get past the attorney generals.
I will look forward to the close and to your joining us there, perhaps for the final wearing of that T-shirt. Marcelo, thank you. Appreciate your joining us.
Thank you, David, for your coverage.